Nice.
Especially those of you who are young at heart, and those who are perhaps a little bit older, who remember Monty Python. And there's a Monty Python clip I was going to show you. You'd have to use your imagination. It was the Olympic Games, and it's supposed to be the 100 metres for those people who have no sense of direction. Does anyone remember seeing it? No. And they go, on your marks, get set, go, and they fire the gun. They all go off all over the place, you know, and it's funny. But it fits in with tonight's theme, being ready to go. Whatever direction God leads you in. So there you go, that's my lead in. Now, first of all, I'm going to send Heather's apologies. She was all fired up and ready to go to do tonight. But yesterday she got this twinge in her back and now she's got this shooting pain and she's fed up. So she would appreciate prayers, and she's feeling very frustrated because she was really looking forward to doing this tonight. But she sent the second best, me, and I've managed to cobble together some of her ideas into what hopefully will be a coherent presentation. So, as you can see on the screen there, we've got a young man who's ready to go on the starting line. And our text for tonight, as you can see, is stand firm with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. Some translations talk about the shoes of the gospel of peace. Being ready to go. And as we know, Paul, who wrote this in the letter to the Ephesians, we think he was either because he was in house arrest and had a Roman soldier nearby, and he had a long time to sort of look at the armour and think, good metaphor there. Or perhaps he saw Roman soldiers walking by, marching by, and thought he could use this to get over, as you know, the idea of the armour of God. Shoes then, a symbol of readiness. So what are often the last things you put on before you leave the house? Your shoes. Could be a coat, couldn't it? But you don't put your shoes on until you actually go. So I think if we think about shoes as a symbol of being ready to go, it could be helpful. As long as those shoes fit you, as long as those shoes are comfortable. I bought these from Clark's the other week in the outlet at, where was I? Salford, I think. And they're the most comfortable shoes I've had in a long time. So I'm ready to go. I feel good about walking out of the house. And I feel confident that whatever I'm going to do, I'll do well. If they weren't fitting me very well, I'd be thinking about the shoes and not what I was doing. So, in my house, I don't know about your house, there's often the shout of, "Are you ready yet? Have you got yourself sorted out yet? Have you got yourself your bag ready and all this?" And when I say that, Heather turns to me and says, "I might not be ready, but you've not got your shoes on yet." So that's what I thought about when I was thinking about shoes. So no shoes on sort of equals not being ready, no readiness to go. Go to the next slide, please. So in that text it said, the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. I thought to myself, what does that actually mean? What kind of peace are we talking about? We all like a bit of peace and quiet, don't we? We like to watch a television programme uninterrupted. I enjoyed watching an episode of Not Going Out the other night when the poor girl was trying to watch a programme. And Lee Mack comes in and sits there and says, "Oh, that actor, I just can't place him." The whole programme was based around him working out who this actor was. And I really felt sorry for his wife who wanted to watch the programme. So peace and quiet allows us to focus when we're watching telly, when we're reading a book. But when I looked it up, there's a Greek word. And is there anybody here called Irene? No? Irene's quite a common name, isn't it? And it's very similar to the Greek name for peace, apparently. Irene, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, is the Greek word used for peace. And according to my source, it refers to a mental attitude of tranquility based on a relationship with God in the Christian way of life. So it's not just any old peace. It's that peace you get when you're right with God and you're living the Christian way. So that gospel of peace, that good news we're talking about, is all about that link with God that gives you that peace. And it describes a person's correct response to God's grace. So when God gives you the love you don't deserve, he's giving you his grace. And if you respond to that with love, then you experience that irene, that peace. The Bible uses peace in two ways. There's that personal peace when you accept Jesus. There's also that peace that you can get on a daily basis, because if you follow the Christian way, that peace, you get a top-up. It's almost like your car or your camera battery running out. You need a top-up. You've got to charge it up. And living the Christian way helps you just top up that battery, that peace that you need to keep going. My sermon that I'm going to be preaching on Sunday is going to be, unfortunately for you, at St John's, is about Aldersgate Sunday and John Wesley. And John Wesley and Charles, who were struggling, they were trying to work out what salvation was, what their faith was all about. And they hadn't quite got there. There was something missing. And within 3 days, they both had an experience which gave them that peace. And John was with his famous heartwarming experience when he heard somebody talking about the change in your heart that comes through accepting Jesus. It was what Paul had written in Romans. I think it was about what Martin Luther was saying about what Paul had written in Romans. But in that setting, that was the right thing for John at the right time. And he realised he was loved. He was loved. He said, even me, my sins were forgiven, even mine. I wouldn't have thought John Wesley was a particularly simple guy, but he must have been pretty weighed down to say that. Even my sins were forgiven. And Charles said that the Spirit chased away the darkness of my sins, or something like that. So within 3 days, they were both singing celebratory hymns because they both got that peace. So, on our next screen, we're going to have a video, I believe, and let me explain what it is before we play it. It's something I looked up on the Methodist website. I'd recommend it to me. It's very new. It's hot off the press, and it's from Methodist Church House. And the guy that introduces it, if any of you were at Synod, you'll have heard Trey Hall speaking, who's our National Evangelism Director or something like that. I'm not sure his official title. But there's a department for evangelism and growth at Church House for the whole of the Methodist Church. It's very exciting. And hopefully you'll catch a bit of the excitement from Trey and his colleagues on this video. Are we okay? Next screen, huh? Try the next one, we'll go back to those. Here we go.
Hi, my name's Trey Hall, and I'm part of the new evangelism and growth team for the Methodist Church in Britain. Why do we care about evangelism? We care because Jesus sends us into the world. The word evangelism comes from a biblical Greek word that means literally good news. So if we are committed to evangelism, we are committed to sharing the good news of God in Jesus Christ. Speaking it, yes. Listening for it in the voices of others, our friends, and people who are strangers to us, yes. Living it out in all of our life, yes. Letting it transform our way of being church, absolutely.
So much of what we talk about is about relationships, and to me, evangelism has to begin with relationships. And unless we have ministers that we're training who are content and comfortable and engaged with and see the privilege of developing pastoral relationships, then it's very hard to see how our gospel can be relevant in the 21st century with the lives we've been living.
Now, for some of us, evangelism conjures up negative images of using fear, or shame, or judgmentalism, coercion. But that's not what we mean by evangelism. That's bad news. Remember, evangelism means good news. And so we want absolutely everybody, every Methodist, to be freed to share the good news of God in Jesus Christ in ways that are deeply authentic to them.
That's why our partner churches are growing. They're not afraid to share their stories of faith. They're not afraid to offer Jesus to someone explicitly. They're not afraid to do that part of what we would consider mission here in the UK.
As the Methodist Church, our calling is to respond to the gospel of God's love in Jesus Christ. And evangelism is a vital part of that calling. Whether you're 14 or 43 or 84, whatever your race or gender or sexual orientation, wherever you are on the theological spectrum, whether you're a committed disciple of Jesus or just beginning to start the faith journey, your spiritual exploration, we believe that we are all called to be evangelists.
This September starts the year of testimony 2019. Jasmine, why are you so happy about it? Because finally we are able to present the gospel in a practical way to both those inside and outside of the churches. We get to hear people's stories, their pain, how they've overcome it, the battles they face. Yes, we see those pretty people in the pews on Sundays looking so amazing, but there's a story behind every person, and that's what gives young people hope, and that's what gives the world hope.
That's the good news of the gospel, the hope of transformation for a world longing for peace and justice.
And as we love the people around us, we cannot help but see the need for justice and respond.
Evangelism is important to me because it worked for me. I didn't grow up going to church, but I met a group of kind and friendly people who were interested in me without an agenda, and it's brought me to the place where I am today. I love to hear other people's faith stories. I love to hear how God is a part of someone else's life.
Evangelism is really important for what we do in World Church Relationships because it's about sharing the love of Jesus Christ around the world with everyone, working with our partners across the world.
Evangelism is important to me because I think it's part of what God's Spirit is doing out there in the world, and I want to join in with what God's Spirit is doing out there in the world. It's the thing that makes me come alive.
We are most likely to come to faith through a conversation with a friend, and that's exactly the premise of this new resource, Talking Jesus. We've sent copies of this to every circuit across the connection. It's a story-based resource using videos and discussions, and it joins talking of God together in our toolkit for evangelism.
In the months ahead, we together will be dreaming big dreams about how local churches can connect to their communities and grow in depth and number. We'll be talking about how we can start a whole bunch of new places for new people. It's exciting times, but those things will only be possible if we trust God and if we commit to evangelism together. Over and over and over again in the Gospels, Jesus sends the disciples out to speak about God's goodness. At the beginning of Acts of the Apostles, he says, go. At the end of every Gospel account, he says, go. We are all called to be evangelists. We believe that absolutely everybody has something to speak about God's goodness in their lives. That's evangelism. That's the good news.
It's exciting to think that the Methodist Church is doing lots of things, and we've got dreams, and we've got plans for the future. I don't know if you've heard about the Year of Testimony, but they've been thinking about it and planning it for some time. Over the last 12 months, the young people at Regenerate have been looking at testimonies that have been written down by ministers and stewards across the country who contributed to a resource bank. And at Regenerate, the youngsters were reading and listening to the stories behind people's journeys to faith to inspire them to write their own testimonies. So as Trey was saying there, we're all called to go. And on the screen there, I've edited down 3 examples. The first one is from the end of Matthew's Gospel, then there's Mark's, and then there's Luke's. And in a way, all 3 of these have that instruction from Jesus to go. Interestingly, here's a bit of a trivia question for you. The middle one from Mark is in italics. Anybody got any idea, just as an interesting aside, why that one was in italics when I pasted it? Yeah, well, they're all spoken. Jesus said all 3. It's a bit... No, that's fine, it's fine. It's just that the middle one comes from that bit at the end of Mark's Gospel that was added on, or we think was added on. Yeah, it really ends when the women are told to go ahead and meet Jesus in Galilee, I think it is. But then there's extra chunks added on, and that bit is from there. And on the online Bible I had, those are italics. So people, we think, in the months and years afterwards, added bits to finish it off because they thought it was missing an ending. Anyway, that's another story. But as you can see, all three are saying what we should go and do. We've got go and make disciples, go and preach the gospel, and forgiveness of sins will be preached in his name to all nations, beginning in Jerusalem. That's where the explosion was to start. And then, of course, we read about when it happens in Acts 2. Now, a little story for you, one of my favourites. I tell this wherever I go when it's to do with evangelism. Keswick Convention. Anybody know Keswick Convention? Been to that? Yeah? Well, the story goes that an elderly gentleman who'd served faithfully as a preacher and teacher about evangelism over many years had been invited to do his last stint. He wasn't going to come again, he was going to do one last preach. So you can imagine the anticipation. He was there in a packed tent at Keswick, and he worked his way up off his chair, and with an expectant hush, as he managed to get up, hold on to the table in front of him. And people were ready for a powerful talk full of theology and inspiration. The faithful were all ears, and he looked up, and he preached what many thought was the best sermon he'd ever given. He simply said these words, "Go on then," and sat down again. So, go on then. That's our message, isn't it? Do it. Do the evangelism that we all read about, learn about, and probably fret about, if we're going to be honest. What were we going to say to people? We're going to watch a second video now this is a man called Tim Keller. He's an American, but he's a well-respected theologian. And there's a few minutes of a talk that he did, and I found it really helpful, and I hope you will as well. I'll just go and get it set up.
Dr. Tim Keller is founder and pastor of New York's Redeemer Presbyterian Church. He is also the New York Times best-selling author of The Reason for God. Since its beginnings in 1989, Redeemer has helped start over 100 smaller churches in the New York metropolitan area, and in a 2006 survey of 2,000 American church leaders, was named the 16th most influential church in America.
Word ministry and deed ministry go hand in hand. In fact, I think that if one side outpaces the other, it all falls apart. If your church strictly does evangelism and just does not care about the needs of your city, people are going to look at that. Outside people are going to look at that and say all they care about is increasing their tribe. They'll see evangelism just as recruitment and an effort to accrue power. On the other hand, if you only do deed ministry, which is also, in a sense, easier without word ministry, because nobody's going to object to you helping the poor. But when you try to bring them together, they actually interact with each other, they stimulate each other. It's harder to keep the two together, I think, because, for the reasons we said. The world doesn't like evangelism. On the other hand, I do think there's a lot of Christians that find deed ministry expensive, distracting from word ministry. Integrating the two is very necessary. It's not that easy to do. Word and deed ministry integrate best at the one-on-one level. If you are reaching out to a neighbor and you're trying to talk to them about Christ, maybe bringing them to church, and yet they've got any kind of personal needs. They've got one family member finds himself in jail. They're struggling financially. Just to be involved with those folks as a Christian friend means you're going to be bringing word and deed ministry together. So at the individual level and at the relational level, you can see why the two things just go together. You can't love your friend without talking about Jesus, and you can't love your friend without babysitting for her so she can go visit her son, in jail and so on. It's only when we get up to the big, massive level of institutions trying to do massive projects that I think it gets harder to keep the two together. But you'll see that God clearly wants them together at that one-on-one level. I would love to put up on a board, if I was talking to some people and I was trying to help them in word ministry, I put up on a board a set of what I would call lay ministry behaviors, which is a little abstract, but lay ministry means word ministry done by lay people, not pastors, not professional Christian workers. And I would start at a very, very simple level. I'd say the very first lay ministry behavior is you let other people know you go to church. Just let them know you go to church. Say something to your colleagues. Say something to your neighbor. Do you do that? See, if you don't do that, then you can't do anything else. And that's a pretty simple thing. But it's actually pretty important, because sometimes you say, I'm going to church, to 4 people, and one of them later on asks you about it. Then the next would be a behavior like you simply let people know that you're a Christian and it means something to you. Maybe a passing thing, saying, well, let's just say you're a woman, you've been angry at your husband, you're sharing with another woman who's been angry at her husband, and you say, my Christian faith has really helped me here. Just passing. That's it. Let it go. If she picks it up and says, really, how? Good. If she doesn't, fine. But see, first of all, there are a lot of behaviors like letting people know you're a Christian, letting people know that Christianity means something to you, letting people know you go to church, that you should be doing, and they will lead in a very organic way to more extensive, more in-depth kinds of discussions. But you should be doing the simplest behaviors first. Loving people, caring for people, being a person of integrity, letting people know your Christian faith is there, saying these kinds of things, and then it'll just bubble up naturally. I think most of us feel like if I'm going to do word ministry and I'm a lay person, I need to find a way to get the whole gospel out in one conversation or get into a debate about creation and evolution or something like that. That's not the way to go. Be simple. Cities are more diverse, so there's more different kind of...
Nothing to worry about, is there? Simple, as he says. Act of church, God help me, things like that. So what we're going to do now is to get round our tables. And the questions that are on there, if somebody who, when they're sitting around the tables, is in the best place to see it, you can be question master and just read the question to your group and then share as much or as little as you want on one or more of the questions. How much time do we have, Brian, before we normally wind up?
Well, just after 8 we need to...
That's fine. Okay, we'll split this into 2 then. We'll do 10 minutes on these 4, and then I'll stop you, and then we'll move on to the next slide, which is something slightly different, which you can do for the last 10 minutes or so. So that's fine. 10 minutes on each one. So you've only got to move around your tables once. You don't have to look at the front again. So get yourself into groups. That'll be fantastic. You don't have to write anything down. We're just talking. God helps us. But the difficulty is, what if it goes a bit deeper? What if somebody says, but what about this? But what about suffering? What about, illness? What about all this unfair treatment? How can you believe in a God who lets that happen? Things like that can often make us feel, do I want to start down that line? And my suggestion is that you say to people quite openly, I don't have an answer to your question, I don't know, but if you'd like, I'll go away and I'll find some information, or I'll ask somebody, and let's meet again for coffee, and I'll see if I can find something out for you, and not let the fish off the hook, as it were, and try and keep the conversation going. Yeah, that's what I would suggest. Is there anything any of the groups want to share with everyone else that think it could be useful to say through the microphone at this point, or are we okay?
Can I just make one thing?
Yeah, you can put together.
I don't say a lot of people like this.
No. Right, you've got 10 seconds.
I think the wrong word in the first thing was the word gospel. Because go and preach the gospel to many people means Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. It's not, it's the good news, and it's one of the strong things in my life. It's not the gospel, it's the good news. And that's what I've said before, Chris, as you know.
Yeah, it's good, and he's spot on, is Peter. People often think of gospel and think Matthew has a gospel, but when I preach about the 4 writers, I always try and say Matthew's account of the gospel, John's account of the gospel, and then you know that it's somebody's viewpoint of the good news as presented by Jesus. So, yeah. Okay, now I don't want the last bit to be cut short because I think the next bit is probably the most important. Can we move on to, I'll move on to the next slide and then we'll see what the final question is going to be. It's very exciting. So what's your story? We heard about the year of testimony, didn't we? About something that you might share with a neighbour or a friend about what God's done for you. So this conversation, this hypothetical conversation that we've been talking about, might get to the point where somebody says to you that question that probably makes us sink into our boots. So how did you become a Christian? Or simply, what's your story with God? So I'm going to invite you just to think about what you think will be most valuable to say as an answer to that question. You don't have to give the whole story, because I can imagine we could go on all night with some people's testimonies about they're all brilliant, and we all have a story of some kind. But how might we begin that conversation with sharing how God's done something for us that we can share with someone else that might help them? Okay? So, what's your story? We'll do that for the last 5 minutes or so. December, and I was stood out in the open air on the grass in front of the Crown, if you know the Crown. And they gave me this microphone, and I started to talk, and then it went. And then it came back again, and it went. So I thought, it's not going to work. So I put the mic down, and I started projecting my voice, and then suddenly the mic came back on, and everyone went. So that got their attention. But that was good. And just as I finished, it stayed dry, just as I finished, the heavens opened and the rain came down and everybody ran into the pub. So I thank God for that I didn't have to be cut short at the end. A judgment? Oh, no, I finished, Brian. If it was halfway through and if I was going on too long, I'm sure he would have. Now, from what I've gathered from listening in, is that hopefully what we've done tonight might make you feel a little bit more confident about starting a conversation, about sharing the fact that you come to church. And not just, we can trust on the let's be nice to people and they see something different in us. In a sense, that's a bit easier. It's when we have to verbalise it that it can get a bit more difficult. But people that you talk to will want to talk. If they're seeking, they will ask you questions. If they want to know what the difference is between you and someone else who doesn't go to church, then that's what they're asking for. They want, why would I want to invest my time in what you're doing? And if they see through you that you are a kind, loving person above and beyond, then they'll be attracted to you, and then they'll want to talk. So I can see that this church, and those of you from other churches that come here, if you take anything away from tonight, just be confident that you can start that conversation, you can share, and just trust that God will give you the right thing to say. The important thing is that you're honest, you're authentic, and if you don't have an answer, say so. But try and keep that fish on the hook, try and keep that relationship going, and invite them around for a cup of tea at another point. It gets particularly difficult in situations like I find when I go to the Willows Centre in Dean, when I'm talking to people that have hardly any English, then it gets a bit trickier. Then it has to be evangelism by deed, because I can only share the odd word with these people, but I'm trusting that God will help them learn. Right, so that's bringing us to a conclusion. Any questions or any interesting points that you want to share with the rest of the group? Or do we think we're okay? Sounds like we're okay. Giving you things to think about. Yeah. I can hear music. Why can't I hear music?
There's a choir practice in the meeting room.
We have angels close by. Okay, well, I'll close with a prayer then, and then we can get on our way. Lord, thank you for your good news. Thank you for the joy that we have in our hearts that make us want to share, make us want to help, out of love for you, for what you did for us when you died on the cross and you came back from the dead. Help us to hold that confidence, that trust that you will be with us in our conversations. And may we follow that instruction that Jesus gave us to go and spread the good news and to begin the making of disciples. We ask all this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
determined I'm not going to speak, isn't he? Before we do go, before we take that journey, literally and metaphorically, I just want to say a couple of things. I'd like to say, first of all, thank you very much to Chris for a really thoughtful presentation. We were saying in our table how we're seeing these different aspects of that instruction or that suggestion from St. Paul explained to us in different ways, how it's giving us new insights into our own way of doing things. And I just love the idea that, from the shoes of peace, we're actually talking about the go factor, to use some modern parlance. Isn't that good? So thank you for that, Chris. Thank you for stepping in for Heather. Had you not done that, I don't know what we'd have done, so thank you, Lord, as well. Please give Heather our best wishes, and we shall say our prayers for her as she's at the moment with the particular problem she's got. So give her her best wishes, as I say. I do want to say thanks to Joyce, as always, for looking after the food, and those who've helped her in the kitchen to sort and organise, and for David over there. And of course for our fact we've been recorded once again at the by Estelle, so thank you, Estelle, for that. Our next meeting, first of all I should say welcome. It's the very end, I'm saying welcome to some of you who have not been here before. We've been boosted slightly by, I was going to call them your groupies, but you know what I mean. So it's been great to have you with us. Two friends over there from the Catholic Church, and you're from the... Shumore, aren't you? Yeah, excellent. Good. So we're always here on this particular Wednesday, except in August. So if you want to come, what we could do is let us know beforehand. Our next meeting is, in fact, on the 19th of June. It's the Shield of Faith, and the Reverend Paul Hardingham, who is the vicar at St. Peter's just down the road, will be leading that particular occasion. And I've just been asked to particularly mention to you that on Saturday morning we're having a coffee morning here. It's our Christian Aid coffee morning. It's our way of boosting the funds locally, because we don't do house-to-house collections like we used to. It's from 9:30. There will be stalls. Two of the stalls are charity stalls. One is Nepalese jewellery, and another one is fair trade, as well as two other stalls as well. So it should be a good morning. It's from 9:30. It's not a craft fair, as mentioned in pulpit on Sunday. Not that at all, but it is what it is. But it does have those two craft aspects. So I hope you'll be able to join us. You'll be very welcome. After 9:30, when we should be open. So thank you for your attendance. Once again, thanks to Chris, and I wish you well and a safe journey home. Good night. God bless.
Thank you.